We are excited to have Robert Head join us on the show today. Robert is a U.S. Army veteran who served with the infantry from 2003 to 2007. He has 29 months of combat experience in leadership. After the Army, Robert set his eyes on Texas A&M University, where he graduated in 2010. In 2016, Robert got into the cannabis industry by creating a cannabis farm in Maine that sold medical-grade cannabis to veterans. Since then, Robert has been a major activist in Texas for legalization and created Hemp for Victory to educate leaders in the military, government, and in industry on how cannabis positively affects veterans and their lives. Robert is married, father of two, and enjoys football and baseball. Robert, thank you for protecting our country and providing our freedom. Welcome to Weed and Whiskey News.
Pleasure. I love it.
All right, so let's get into it and cut it up. Tell us a little bit about Blue Cord Farms and what blue cord really means.
So blue cord is a cord that's worn on the military uniform for the infantry in the Army. And so my friend and I that started our first farm was up in Maine. When we put everything together, we're like, hey, you know what kind of good names we have. I said, hey, you know what? I like the idea of Blue Cord Farms. 2 infantry guys growing some cannabis and helping out veterans. And what we wound up doing is developing a little farm up there that was called a caregiver farm in Maine. And we went for a couple of years and we sold to vets and then got involved in some local organizations, and it was great. The industry is always pretty tough, so we wound up closing that down, and I really focused more on activism. And so I kept Blue Cord Farms as a way, just as a company that I would do education with. And so the past several years, I've been involved with educating and talking to people about how cannabis is really affecting veterans' lives in a positive way.
Sure.
And so over those years, I wound up developing Hemp for Victory after that.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's not often that you see somebody that has an infantryman's badge, a Texas logo, and a marijuana leaf on their lapel. It starts conversations for you, I would imagine.
Quite a bit, especially if I'm ever down in Austin. Yeah, they get quite a bit of conversations about it. And people tend to think whether you're left or you're right, and I'm not. I'm really, I don't really participate in any other parties, and I don't participate really in politics. My focus is that cannabis is often a misunderstood plant. A lot of times people think that it's either demonized, and as we were discussing earlier, there's been tens of thousands of years that cannabis has been a part of the human society. And recently the past 80 years, we've just kind of eliminated it. Well, the problem with this is that in 80 years, everybody's memory of all the good things that cannabis has done has pretty been wiped clean and replaced with these demonized ideologies that marijuana is the fault for people not succeeding in life, or marijuana is the fault for kids getting addicted to drugs, or marijuana is the fault for the uptick in crime. But in fact, it was them making marijuana illegal that created the crime.
Well, now the Hemp for Victory, as many of our partakers know, we have the propaganda film from, I believe, the 40s on Weed and Whiskey TV. You chose to play off of the Hemp for Victory. At that time, you could pay taxes with hemp. Our country asked farmers to grow hemp, but as soon as the war was over, it's back to being an illegal thing, right?
Right. So they started growing hemp again in the World War II efforts in order to make sales and different types of equipment that they needed in the war. Once the war ended, then the legality of growing weed, or not weed, but industrial cannabis went away. Now, one of the things we said was that Hemp for Victory, and the reason we chose that term is that we're facing another catastrophe in most of the military and veterans. We've seen a huge amount of suicide rates, around 22 a day, and that's probably a lot higher, really, because when we look at the statistics, there's a lot of things that are kind of left out that we just don't know, and so we really believe that number is probably higher, and that comes with an over medication of veterans. As soon as they leave the military and they get into civilian life, they start this pharmacological journey, and you know, when you start off, you get 2 or 3 pills, and then in 5 or 6 years, you're at 14 or 15 pills, and you have a lot more problems than you first started out with. So we have a big issue right now with veterans becoming sicker as they get out, and they really could not be. You know, we could really change the tide in this by looking at more holistic approaches, and cannabis is one of those holistic approaches.
The illegality of cannabis on the federal level eliminates so many opportunities for veterans to have a chance to even see if some of these treatments and therapies using the plant could be beneficial for them.
Correct. And that's one of the reasons what Hemp for Victory actually is a group of senior level board members who believe that cannabis is a better option than a lot of the pills that we have out there. And we believe that people need to be educated on how this actually positively affects the veterans in our society. So we have a Major General, we have colonels that were Harvard educated and are teaching at Dartmouth. We have lieutenant colonels that were big influences in Ukraine and other aspects of the military in the War College, where they studied and they taught. So our board members are very experienced in the military life. They understand how things proceed, how things go from being illegal and how it affects everybody. We're well aware. We feel like if we can talk, we use these groups to talk to senior military leadership, to federal government leadership, to industries, their leaders, to let them know how it's affecting them. And why is that important? Because there's no reason a veteran should lose his job because he's trying to reduce his pill intake from 14 to 4, but yet he pops hot on a urinalysis.
Or turns to more and more alcohol.
Or turns to more and more alcohol, which is also a vice.
Sure. Folks, here on Weed and Whiskey, we preach moderation. Whatever it is that you do, it doesn't have to be alcohol. It doesn't have to be cannabis. It could be food. It could be TV. There's so many things. If you overindulge, it's not good for you. But you have to think about this. Our veterans, they need something other than alcohol to be able to turn to.
Finding that balance in your life is very important. And I think you see a lot more veterans start to really go towards that holistic venture when it comes to their medicine, right? And that is important, right? That balance is very important in your life. If you're going to work out, whatever it is that you do, you make sure you have a good balance in your life, and moderation is a way to do that.
Sure.
And our vets right now are in a very tricky situation where a combat veteran is 60% more likely to use cannabis than the general public. 93% of 18-year-olds to 25-year-olds who want to get into the military have access to legal cannabis that can make them ineligible to be in the military. We're facing issues right now where we have veterans that are dying that are combat experienced, and we don't have enough people to get into our military in case something else happens. And I'm not saying that cannabis is the one-all solution, but there's multiple solutions to this, and cannabis is definitely one of them. Making it legal or descheduling it could help us in getting more people available for military service. And on top of that, you could reduce the pill consumption for veterans. You can see more veterans being active in their families, active in their communities, and probably have reduced the cost at the healthcare facilities.
You know, folks, you probably heard me mention my dad. He's an Army veteran. We lost him at 92. And so I've got a special place in my heart for our veterans and for what our military provides us. It provides our freedom and our way of life. Robert, I think we're at our lowest point in our volunteer service right now as far as numbers. And this cannabis thing could be a reason that younger people aren't as interested in going into the military. So would legalization, how do you feel legalization would help our veterans?
Well, I think legalization would help our veterans in a massive amount of ways. One of the specific ways is just taking it from a D schedule, right? If it was it's at Schedule 1 right now. So if you take it from Schedule 1 and you dropped it down to Schedule 2, then what you'd need is a prescription, and you'd have to be able to get it through your doctor and everything else, right? So a lot of the dispensaries and everything else may have to rework how their legislation is to match the laws. If you deschedule it and you take it completely off the scheduled form, then places like Colorado and everything else are in line and should be able to get bank accounts. And then you will see veterans being able to go out and purchase their cannabis instead of from the black market, they're purchasing it from the legal market. And I'm going to tell you right now, most vets probably get their stuff from the black market because it's cheaper, it's more available, and they can get what it is they want. And I think that's another thing that people need to understand. It's not just smoking a bowl or a bong or a joint. There's multiple ways to use cannabis. You can use them as tinctures. You can use them as pills. You can use them as salves on your joints. You can use them as to make tea with,
Sure.
or what have you. There's different ways to ingest cannabis. And we call those ways delivery systems.
Well,
right?
CBD, there's some inroads that's being made with this, but there's still a vulnerability because certain CBDs can have trace amounts of THC that could show up. Are we still having veterans that are vulnerable if they go to the VA and if they have to do a urinalysis and they've got marijuana in their system or THC in their system that they could lose their benefits? Is that still an issue?
So I'm glad you brought that up. That is not an issue any longer.
Thank you.
I'll make sure that I'll send you the link to the webpage on the Veteran Affairs webpage. It says that they're not going to take any of your.
But in the past, they could have.
In the past, they could have, but they did come out and say that they're not going to take any of your disability payments or anything away. So you'll constantly get care or whatever. And I would suggest that you let your doctor know, because that is between you and your doctor. They're not going to rat you out. None of that's going to happen. But the thing about urinalysis, the VA doesn't do a lot of urinalysis where they're concerned about cannabis. They're really looking at other things. So that concern, while it is very nervous, and it keeps people from going from prescriptions, because you may be in a legal state, veteran in a legal state, he cannot afford insurance, right? Which means he probably can't afford his prescriptions. So he has to get everything from the VA. And he knows, and he may be only aware that if I tell them that I use cannabis, if I use cannabis, I lose all my benefits, right? Well, I need that heart medicine, and I need this other medication. The issue that's starting to be created, now he's in a legal place where he could use it, but he's misinformed, so now he takes all these other prescriptions instead. Whereas he could have used cannabis, he would have had no negative impact from the VA because the VA already stated that they wouldn't, and he probably could have reduced his pill consumption. And this is something that happens quite often. I mean, we see if you're in Colorado, and let's say you're an active duty military soldier, right? You're married, and your wife goes out and she gets out of let's say you guys live off post, so you don't have to go by the federal law. You live off post. You can go buy it and bring it back to your house. But as soon as your husband comes back to the house, and if he pops hot for whatever reason, he's out of the military.
Yeah.
And that's not fair, because you're losing very good soldiers, all right? I'm going to tell you what, I was a grunt. I don't know a soldier out there that wasn't a little bit crazy and done some stupid stuff. That's part of being a soldier. I mean, that's, everybody out there will go, yep, sure. That's part of being a soldier. But they don't realize how good these young soldiers will be in a couple of years.
Sure.
You really don't know. And so just kick them out and throw them aside. Man, they got into the military because they had nothing else. I got into the military because it was either that or I was going to be dead by 30. Yeah. I had my choice.
Sure.
I chose to be a better man, so I went into the military. And I'm not alone in that. And so kicking these guys out,
well, I'm assuming cool. The military helped you get your degree from Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta wrap up here, Robert. As I mentioned before we started the show, we're going to support Hemp for Victory in 2023 and have Robert and some of the brass maybe come on the show and tell us how things are progressing in the future. But share with us one last final comment about how people could help Hemp for Victory. Are you a 501c now? Could people donate money to you? How could that work for you to get the mission up and running? What do you need for help?
So I tell you, we are brand spanking new. We started this year. We're still raising money, so we're always looking for donations and capital partners, that businesses, corporate sponsors that really believe in this movement. What we do is conversations. We host discussions with military leaders to have them a better understanding, and civilian leadership too, a better understanding of how cannabis is positively affecting veterans, from industrial hemp to CBD to medical marijuana. We don't get involved in politics, but one of the things we do need is that we're not tech savvy. So like a website, we need to put together a website that would be helpful. So people who know how to do websites, if you're very good, if you wouldn't mind helping us out by helping us develop a good website, that would be one of the definite things that we need. Good corporate sponsors from industries that say they always support. I want to see it, right? Like, this is something that nobody else is doing. People aren't bringing a whole bunch of colonels and generals together to say, we need to host discussions to tell you why this is a better option. And like I said, we're not trying to persuade Congress or anything else to make specific legislation, but I know that if you understand cannabis better and how it's positively affecting the veteran community, my community, then you're going to have a better understanding of the legislation that comes up, and you're going to have a better way of governing. I don't expect anybody who is not in the cannabis industry to know everything about it. I don't expect the people who are the military installations at Fort Leavenworth to know everything there is to know about why cannabis is positively affecting what's going on in the body and everything else. But us, like my one of our board members, Todd Scatini, he is going to have a conversation with their command staff about these things, about what cannabis actually is and the benefit it has to the military. That's what we do.
Well, man, that's great. It was exciting to have you on here today, and we look forward to having you here in the very near future to hear more about how we're helping our veterans and getting them the help that they need. Folks, here at Weed and Whiskey News, our goal is to bring you real news, real information using an entertaining format. Thank you for partaking with us today, and we look forward to joining you next week.